want to turn a corner here, take a look at how the United States might respond to what has happened, and perhaps how the United States should respond. Peter Bergen is a CNN terrorism analyst, and he joins us. Also, William Lures is with us as well to join in this conversation. Good evening to you. You have been patiently waiting in this hot room tonight. And Peter, I know you're there. And Mr. Lures, wait another minute for me. Let me start with Peter. Peter, if you had to bet here, what do you think the response, how massive the response are we going to see?
Well, let me say that I met with bin Laden in 1997 in Afghanistan, and if a military operation is being contemplated to take him out or snatch him in some way, that would be an operation that would encounter considerable resistance for the following reasons. Bin Laden, when I met with him, was surrounded by a group of at least a couple of dozen heavily armed men who are armed with RPGs and Russian submachine guns. They're highly motivated, they're prepared to die, and that was just in the course of just doing an interview. Obviously, bin Laden must be very concerned about his security right now, and he has hundreds of followers who might be surrounding him. Also, any American military operation in Afghanistan would be conducted in some of the most inhospitable terrain in the world. It's a rocky, mountainous, desert region. It's an area with which bin Laden is very familiar, and with which Americans aren't very familiar. The last time America had a presence in Afghanistan was in 1989. Since then, the embassy there has been closed. So the information the United States has about the country is second-hand and old. Aaron.
And so that kind of surgical mission, go in there and get him, if that's what we're talking about, would be very difficult to do. And in fact, the United States hadn't had a whole lot of success with that sort of operation.
Well, let's think about Somalia, where 18 American servicemen died in a very intense two-day firefight. We were trying to snatch or kill Mohammed Aidid, the clan leader there, if you remember, in 1993. That was an unmitigated disaster. This would be much tougher, I think, because A, there's no element of surprise. Bin Laden knows we're coming after him, and B, it's a country in Somalia there were 28,000 American soldiers who had been there for several months, and this is not going to be the situation in Afghanistan. We're going to go in, we're going to not know much about this. If we do go in, we're not going to know much about the terrain, and we're going to be faced with people whose main mission in life is to die. I mean, these people want to die. They think they're instantly going to paradise, and they're very prepared to die for their leader.
Turn to Mr. Lures here. What's your fear? What's your worst fear in all this?
My fear is that we will come off to the world as trigger-happy rather than intelligent, resolved, and determined to get this done.
Well,
Let me just say, when the Second World War began, after Pearl Harbor, we first had to figure out how we're going to defend our country at home. Mm-hmm. Get our security in place. Then we had to build a capacity to do that, to take on the Japanese and the Germans. And we didn't have the capacity for either one. And it took time. That war took 4 years. And I would argue that this is so serious, and this is so long-term, that we need to develop the capacity, which is really anti-American, to deal with this type of challenge to our society. The airplane thing is only one small element of dealing with the threat of terrorism in our society. And then secondly, we have to begin to develop the type of intelligence capacity that will enable us to deal with the broad issue. It's not just Osama bin Laden. It's a huge problem.
But look, tell me if you think this is fair, that there are really two issues on the table tonight. There is the issue of who committed this atrocity. That's issue number one. And what are we going to do about that? And that plays to, it is connected to issue number two, which is the broader question of how does our nation, how do all nations, all civilized, responsible nations, however you want to put it, how do they deal with this broader problem of terrorism? But why do you think it's necessary to link them? Why not deal with one at a time?
Because this network is not just Osama bin Laden. It's a network that has penetrated our society, the Middle East, but Europe, and they're everywhere. And I don't believe for a minute that the thousands of people out there will be affected if we kill if we're able to kill, and as you just heard, it's going to be very difficult to do that, Osama bin Laden. I mean, this isn't about revenge. This is about winning. And I think it's going to take a long time. It's not simply who did that. Many of the people who did it are now dead. They died in those aircraft. Who planned it? It's probably much more difficult to find that out. And I'm merely suggesting that as angry as this city is and this country is, and as ready as we are to be awakened to the fact that there's a world out there that we've got to understand better and deal with better, and that there's a world in here that we have to protect better, that we've got to take our time at doing that. This isn't about a trigger-happy America. This is about a determined, powerful, intelligent America.
We have pretty angry America.
We have to think better than this guy does and these people do, and we have to shoot better. And I think it's going to take us a while. And I, for one, am not anxious to drop bombs and shoot at people. I think we should root out these problems wherever they are in our society, build up our forces, and develop our intelligence capacity so that over the next, I think it'll take a couple of years to get this thing resolved. And we've got to be ready for that. This is a long struggle.
Just, Peter, quickly before you get away, I wonder, just in 20 seconds or so, if you agree with that, that what we're looking at, if the world is looking at eliminating terrorism, and I must admit, that sounds like a pretty tall task to me, if you think it's possible at all.
Well, if we're talking about, let's say, just eliminating Osama bin Laden, obviously that would have some effect on his network, which is clearly the main terrorist threat the United States faces, because he has a certain charismatic presence and he's regarded as a leader. But the inherent problems wouldn't go away. There's a set of people who are opposed to United States policies in the Middle East, and those people aren't going to magically change their views overnight if their leader is assassinated or magically dies of some mysterious illness. So I think I would agree largely this is a long-term thing. Eliminating him tomorrow would certainly solve some short-term problems, but it wouldn't be the end of the whole story.
Peter, thanks. It's good to talk to you again. Mr. Lewis, nice to meet you. The UN Association, the chairman thereof. Appreciate your coming in and your patience today.
Thank you.
It's a very provocative way to look at this. It's probably healthy to get it on the table as well.